Alright, this is a little tutorial on secondary color correction. One of the things that secondary color correction is often used for is to fix skin tones. And now this skin tone is pretty good, but some might say, oh, maybe it's a little red or maybe it's a little oversaturated. So we're going to fix that, and I'll show you how to do that in secondaries. This is the secondary for Apple's color. And if you notice along here that I'm in primary color correction or secondary color correction, this is the secondary color correction tab. It pretty much looks identical to the primary color correction tab, except for the fact that you've got these two windows down here that allow you to see the matte that you're making or the mask that you're making instead of in primary color correction seeing the curves. In secondaries, to start your color correction, the first thing you have to do is enable the secondary, which is done by clicking on this enabled check mark right here. The next thing to do would be to select or qualify your secondary. Now we're going to qualify the skin tones in the secondary, which, as you can see, actually there's a lot of tones that are similar in this picture to the skin tones. I'm going to just select this area right here, and you can see that the part of the skin tones that's selected when you have this choice made here, this little middle button choice. The bottom button choice gives you what your matte is. This choice tells you in a black and white image, it's showing you in color what you've selected, and the top just shows you the pure color. So here what I'm trying to do is make sure that all of the skin tones are selected. As you can see, it's really only just kind of the front of her face and maybe some of his skin tones, because there's a lot of highlight area. We don't have all this selected, and because a lot of the bottom part of her face is in shadow, we don't have all that selected. The way that we can do that is over here in these sliders. We can choose how much of the saturation, or I'm sorry, this is the hue. By adjusting the hue of that, we're not really picking up any more of her face. It's really not helping us to get any more of the skin tones with the hue being widened. We can do the same thing for saturation. How much saturation? Now saturation does seem to make a little difference. We picked up a little bit more of her nose, a little bit more of his skin tone on the low side. On the high side of saturation, once again, we're getting some more of the highlight area on the side of the boy's face, but not a lot. So luminance, it tells me, is going to be a lot of where we're going to change the matte. And down here, look down here in this matte area, or if I switch this over here, you'd be able to see it in this area. As I change the bottom end of luminance, in other words, to pick up more of the darker skin tone elements, you can see how much more of it I'm getting. And we're going to just kind of dial this in until we have most of the skin tones selected, but we don't have skin tones, we don't have any of the other tones from any of the rest of the image selected. That's our object, is to just qualify the skin tones. We can also change kind of the ramp of that by grabbing this little end part of this, and this will pull some of the, kind of soften that edge, get some of the transition areas. That's how you do that, is just to kind of right here in this section change this ramp, and that can be done by holding down the shift key, and that will only pull one side of the ramp instead of both. If I don't hold down the shift key, then you can see I'm actually pulling both sides of this ramp. I'm going to set that back a little bit because I don't want to get too much of the rest of the image. Now you can see that if I were to pull a matte on this, it would also look a little on the rough side. Down here you can set the amount of blur. So here it is at off, and it's quite a sharp, this is quite a sharp crisp image. And if you hover your mouse over this key blur area, so this goes with a light blue or light cyan box around it, and hold down the center jog, the center, I'm using one of those Mighty Mouses, so it's just the little dot on the top of the mouse. Just hold that down and you can see that this softens the matte significantly. You don't want it too soft because otherwise you'll kind of create some haloing, but you do want to crank this up so that you definitely you have a nice soft fall off when you start doing your correction. I'm going to switch from matte up to the full color image here, and at this point we've selected that skin tone separate from the rest of the image. Any of the controls that we adjust, whether we adjust the mid-tone hue offset wheel, or this is a color wheel, or whether we adjust the saturation, for example, that will only occur in the area of the matte that is white. switch that and only have it be outside the area that is white right here. There's a little inside outside, and you could choose outside, and then we'd leave the skin tones alone but change everything that's not a skin tone. But we'll do the skin tones. Once again, hover over this, use your scroll button on the mouse, push that in, and you can pull out the saturation of their skin tone until you feel comfortable with it. Or if you really want to ramp it up, crank up the saturation, and we can also warm it up significantly by pulling this up into the red tones, and you can see we really get a very, very warm image. If we were trying to fake like a warm sunset or something that was falling on their faces, that would be a way to go. Or if we were trying to match another shot that had maybe an incandescent light in the shot, and we were trying to show that they're in a warm area, we could bring that up. If we want to instead show that even though they're smiling, that maybe this is a kind of a frosty relationship, or maybe the little boy is sick or something's wrong, we could add a lot of blue to that, and we could pull out a lot of saturation in just their skin tones. Now you're going to see that little highlight of his cheek is going to start to separate out a little bit as we do a drastic change in the color correction. But you can see here that even though we haven't changed the rest of the shot, we have changed the skin tones other than this little highlight on his cheek, and I could go in with a secondary color correction and fix this cheek as well if I wanted to. So that's one aspect of secondary color correction, and you can turn it on and off to see the difference. Another method of doing a secondary color correction, if we go down here, there are multiple tabs. You can actually add 8 different secondary color corrections. If we go to tab 2, you can enable this, go to vignette, and here's an oval. You can drag this out into any shape you want. If you want to, you can actually do custom shapes. Instead of a circle, you could choose a user shape or a square. User shapes are drawn with basically dots drawn on the screen, or Bezier curves. I'm going to just use a simple circle. And if we want to focus the attention, the viewer's attention, on the faces of the mother and son, we can draw this little shape like this, choose outside from up here, which is what I was showing you before, because the inside of the picture now looks pretty good. On the outside, we want to just darken that, which will focus attention more on the center of the image. So all I'm really going to do is I'm going to bring my master gain down a little bit by hovering over this, clicking on the jog scroll bar, and pulling down the master gain a little bit. You can also pull down the master gamma a little bit. This is a pretty sharp circle here, and you can see, well, that just looks goofy. Obviously what we need to do with that is soften that. So I'm going to hover over this, click on the jog shuttle wheel, and just do a nice elegant softening of that circle. Now you can see the difference from here, this shot, to here, this shot. If you just cut to this shot instead of seeing this shot, the before and after, this really focuses your attention on them, and it doesn't look like an effect really. It just helps you focus your attention. You see this a lot in spots. What you can do if you want to see whether a vignette has been applied to a shot is almost always look at the corners, and if the corners are dark, you don't usually notice the transition, like that the middle is bright, but you will notice the fall off. If you look into the corners of the shot, you can usually tell that a vignette has been applied. So anyhow, it's a nice way to focus attention. You can definitely see the difference between this shot and this shot. Definitely a big difference, and the vignette really helps. A few more things about the secondaries. As I said, you can have these 8 tabs all having different secondaries. Another thing is that it's really 16, because you can correct inside and outside of every single one of those secondaries. That's a huge, powerful tool. Another thing is that you can combine one of these vignettes with another type of color correction. For example, if we're on our first secondary color correction, the one with the skin tones, and you want to isolate the skin tones kind of with a garbage mat, you can actually add the vignette to that, and it would help to isolate just the skin tones a little bit more. You can see if I drag this out, so it kind of covers their the flesh tones of their face. Obviously this would either have to be tracked, or they couldn't move too much. Now if I go to looking at just the key, and I've got this enabled, I'm going to change the softness a little bit, And we could also change the size on that a little bit. You could do that right here. And you can see how between having the vignette on and off, we've helped to isolate a little bit more than just having the matte pulled based on the skin tone, basically the red or pinkish skin tones. We've also added this garbage matte that we've made with the oval. So some really powerful tools. It's just another way that you can work. And once again, in that secondary, you can have the full range of primary color corrections basically added to secondaries. Another way to do secondary, if we go to another tab, I'm just going to disable this secondary, go to my third secondary. There are these hue curve, saturation curve, and luma curve tabs here, and they look like they're all the same, but basically what it allows you to do is to pick a color off this color spectrum, something that's essentially skin tone color, for example, and drag just that area up and down, changing just the skin tone, the hue of the skin tone. If you want to reset that, you can click on this little diamond there. Saturation does, you click on that area and it will pull the saturation up or down on just the skin tone. And the luma curve will just select the luminance of the skin tone, either brighter or darker. Looks a little nasty there, but I'm making some pretty drastic changes. So those are the different ways you can do secondaries and add secondaries. You can also reset your secondaries or reset all secondaries with these buttons right over here. And that's a little tutorial on using secondaries in Apple's Color, using secondaries in other applications like, for example, Color Finesse or Avid Symphony, or some of the other Avid products would be similar, although the lower end Avid products don't have secondaries, but the Symphony and Symphony DS and DS Nitrous all do. Hope you enjoyed this color correction tutorial. Please buy my books, The Art and Technique of Digital Color Correction by Focal Press, and also Color Correction for Digital Video.